Welcome back to Bright and Ambitious, a podcast dedicated to helping you write, revise, and publish your next story. I'm your host, Kaylee Bright.
And I am the producer of the show, Joel Seymour.
Hello, Joel Seymour.
Hello, Kaylee Bright. How you feeling?
Not well.
What's been going on?
I submitted the first few chapters of the rough draft of Catalina, and honestly, all of the comments are super valid, so that's not the issue. It's just a combination of having a lot in my mind and nothing quite on the page or resolved yet. I feel very much like a detective trying to figure out my own story.
Yeah, and that is daunting, especially coming out of a trilogy where you knew going into these books where things were going to be heading.
Yeah, and I certainly don't want to feel like I'm a has-been after only one trilogy.
Right, exactly. And I don't think you are. And in fact, I think that you're on a really good trajectory. And you actually also got some good advice from another writing friend of ours.
Yeah, I got to talk to Amber Mulinax about her short stories as well as her creative process in creating them.
Yeah, she has published her short stories and some poems in multiple literary journals.
She has.
But she is also, as well as being an author, an artist who has had her paintings and illustrations featured in multiple galleries across South Carolina. So I got a little bit of a preview of what y'all talked about, but what's in store for us today?
Well, exactly what you just said. But the topics that we're exploring are the differences and similarities between traditional art and writing, how to make time for your creative outlets, the advantages of writing a short story over a novel, because a lot of the times people really want to just create their first novel when there are actually a lot of different ways you can be a writer. And then finally, how to find places to publish your work.
Awesome. Well, I'm really looking forward to it. Should we just jump right in?
Absolutely.
All right.
Amber, you are a woman with many talents. And as much as I've been giving you a lot of praise and you are uncomfortable by that, it is very true. Because, you are one, if not the only people that I know who has, an eye for everything. And that, includes fashion, art, and writing. So, I see the painting in the background, which I'm assuming is yours. I think I've seen that before. So, I wanted to ask, when did you find out that you were both a visual and non-visual artist? Because I'm definitely a non-visual, and I feel like it's very rare to be both.
I have always really enjoyed drawing. As a child growing up, I really enjoyed color pencil drawings, and I think I got the art kit that everybody growing up gets at some point in their life. That has the little tiny markers and the little tiny colored pencils, and it comes in a black plastic fold out case.
Yes, it's the same material they put those cakes in that you can't quite get out. Yeah.
Yes, and you spend all of Christmas morning trying to pry them out of the container, and by the time you actually use them, some of them are dried up. I remember getting one of those when I was a kid, and I was so excited for it, and I absolutely used all of those art supplies till the wheels ran out on them. I mean,
oh wow.
So I always grew up kind of always drawing, and I used to draw my own little comics and things like that, but I never really seriously took visual art to a serious level till I was in high school. All of our freshmen were supposed to take an art class, a basic level art class.
Right.
And when I was in that class, the art teacher kind of saw that I had some kind of potential, but we weren't sure what it was. And she ended up bumping me up to the next level of art classes at our high school. So I was a freshman in a class of seniors. So that was super unnerving.
Wow.
And so I ended up getting to work on like murals that we had at our high school. I got to really explore different types of art that I had never even thought about growing up. Because I was like a fantasy girly where I draw comics and fairies and, cutesy stuff, and like Sailor Moon,
yes.
drawings and stuff like that. And when I was in that high school art class, I had to do portraits and landscape, and we had a project where we had to do take a magnifying glass and draw while looking through the magnifying glass, creative stuff that I had never thought of. So that's when I really kind of thought, well, maybe, there's something there. It's fun. Either way, I'm having a good time. And when I got to college, I said, hey, I ended up changing my major. And I was like, well, I need a minor. I guess I'll take some art classes. I like it. And from there, I just really tried to make the most of my free time. And so I'm still learning. I'm still growing. My paintings, as you can see in the background, I just started painting in the last maybe 2 years.
Really?
So I had never. I'm more of a traditional, like, color pencil graphite kind of girly. I like black and white artwork the most to make. So I'm really trying to. I'm still learning, still trying to, find new ways to make art. But yeah, it's in development. I wouldn't say that I'm like for sure like I know exactly what I'm doing visually, but I'm figuring it out.
Yeah, you don't have to be like overconfident, but I would say that you are definitely someone who knows how to do art. And the fact that like you've featured your art like in art galleries before, I believe it was like the Art Center of Greenwood,
Right.
that either that art or another piece was added to.
Yes, I had artwork in a gallery in Somerville for I think a couple of months last year. But yeah, it's a fun process to kind of try different things visually that I've never done before. But it is a lot of different steps, a lot of different processes than writing, which is, it's still, kind of tapping into that creative outlet that you kind of have as a writer, but just in a different form. It's hard to explain, but the way that you picture like battle scenes from your book, or you kind of map it out in your head. With visual art, it's the same kind of process where you're trying to visualize something that you want to create and you want other people to see. Like when you read a book, you can see the events in your mind. You can see what the characters look like. It's tapping into that and putting it in the real world for you to see. And not just visualize in your head, but you're actually able to see a representation of that, colors, textures,
Right.
composition, stuff like that. So it's a different process, but it's still interesting. It's interesting to learn how to do as I'm kind of going along. So
Yeah, that's why I had to like highlight like the visual versus non-visual, is because like I do spend a lot of time having to like visualize scenes in my mind, and it definitely takes a lot of process in order to like write that so other people can imagine it the way that I did, and things don't get lost in translation, or else people are going to get confused. And I did have that for like my first book when it came to some of the fight scenes. I had a couple of notes saying that the fight scenes were confusing. So I took a lot more pains into like staging fight scenes and figuring out where characters were. And I'd actually like draw out very, very crudely the scene on a piece of paper. But I wanted to ask, because like when it comes to like fan art, especially, like I struggle a lot with knowing what I want, even though I know the characters. And so I just really wanted to ask you about that.
yeah.
But you did mention about how like you're still growing, you're still learning. So like I wanted to also know, because you have a lot of different interests, how do you balance all of these passions, and how do you cultivate these hobbies into accreditation? Because you're not just drawing and writing, you're putting these art pieces in galleries, and you're also publishing your work.
Right. So I think one of my biggest struggles as someone who has multiple hobbies and multiple creative outlets is finding the time to invest in those skills, especially, if you're in school or if you work, if you have a family or you have different other responsibilities in your life, it's hard to find time for that. At the end of the day, having a creative outlet, especially a creative outlet where you have to really sit down and invest a couple hours at a time, it's a skill that you really have to invest in yourself. It's not just investing time, you're investing in yourself. You're giving yourself an opportunity to get out those creative thoughts, to spend time doing something that you know is going to benefit you and your craft. And at some points, you have to make sacrifices. You might have work the next morning and you say, well, I've got 1 hour to work on this writing piece or this artwork or whatever your craft is. And you say, well, I'm really getting into this. I want to keep going, but I have to go to sleep. Sometimes the sacrifice is a couple extra hours of sleep that you could be getting. You might have to cancel an event with a friend. Sacrifices sometimes do have to be made. But at the end of the day, it is an investment in your skill set. Especially for me, I work full time. I'm also married and I have a, household to keep up.
Yeah, you do.
So it's different than when I was at college and, I had one class a day and I could just do whatever I wanted to and, kind of goof off and paint or draw or write or, go to the library and read. It is a different, schedule of, availability for that. But at the end of the day, I try to look at it as I'm not wasting time writing, or I'm not, cramming time to write, or, oh my gosh, I have to write tonight. I look at it as I'm investing in myself, I'm investing in my skill set, and at the end of the day, I'm investing in my writing, or I'm investing in my artwork, because it's kind of like your child. You cultivate it, you show compassion to it, you make sacrifices for it. At the end of the day, your goal should be to present the best version of yourself through your craft. You want to make sure that, if you're going to do something, you do it the best way you can. And at the end of the day, sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't, you fall flat. But at the end of the day, you can say, I spent the time, I made sacrifices, I did this because I care, and I want this to succeed. I want this to look beautiful. I want this to convey a message. So you have to make time, even sometimes when you don't have the time. There are ways to kind of work around it. I'm not sure if that answers your question, but it's a roundabout.
It beautifully. I was enamored by that response. I was like, wow. Cause I'm sure the people listening absolutely needed to hear that, but I personally needed to hear you say that because, with writing Catalina, it's been a little difficult, transitioning from a story that I know very, very well to a completely new story that is foreign to me. And it's really building a lot more from scratch than I've become accustomed to. And so last night in particular, I was like, okay, we're going to get Boba. We're going to sit down and we're going to write 3 chapters. We're just and I was maybe being a little over ambitious just because, I've been trying to meet these marks, and I've been doing this for 3 years. And so I really thought I could do that again with this new project. And last night, I had to be satisfied with only writing the rest of 1 chapter and writing another scene, not necessarily its own chapter. And I had to be okay with that because at the end of the time, I was tired. I was if I continue more right now, it's not going to be good. It's just going to be filling up the time. And so I really appreciate you saying that because rewiring your brain to make sure that when you are writing, creating, etc., that you're doing it with a joyful heart, that changes everything. So I love that response.
Well, and what you said really rang a bell with me. Like, you were like, we're going to get boba and we're going to sit down and we're going to work on this. I really feel like writing is kind of therapeutic, and it's like a self-care. Like, if you, at the end of the day, no matter what you're creating or what you're putting your time into, if you make it a special occasion, you make it a joyful experience, if that means getting boba, if that means, you have your favorite TV show playing in the background, you set the scene for your creativity. At the end of the day, it won't seem like, oh, I have to sit down and write, I have to get through this. You're making it special for yourself, and you're more likely to make the progress that you want. And even if you don't, you can say, I had fun. And, having fun is literally half the battle of creating anything. If you're not having fun, then maybe it's not the project you should be working on at that moment. Put it to the side, work on something else. Not everything is going to be fun all the time, but your product that you're working on should have some form of fun in it. If it's the theme that you're trying to convey, it's the characters that you love, the process might be hard, but the product should be fun.
So, speaking of your works, I did read Paper Thin Walls and Skeleton Soup before our meeting today. I love both of them, but Skeleton Soup really got me. I was intrigued already by the title, and then I didn't realize it was going to be a poem. And so, gosh, I was enamored.
Well, thank you.
Okay, before I keep just gushing, one of the questions I did have is that your titles are so captivating. And so, I wanted to know how you decide what you're going to title your work, especially because oftentimes they're either poetry or short stories. And I feel like that can either be incredibly hard or incredibly easy. I have no idea.
I will say it might be a little bit unconventional, but okay. I usually write the content itself first and then wait to title it after. I don't usually go in with a title in mind. It's more of a general feeling or a general theme of what I want to write. And then I pull the title usually from what the writing is about. So All the Tex and Poppies, I knew going into that story that I really wanted to have a dramatic scene with a poppy field in the background. It was more of a general setting and feeling than going in with all the Tex and Poppies and then crafting off of that. So usually my titles come afterwards, which I'm not sure if that's how a lot of other writers of short stories and poetry do it. But that's my process, at least.
I imagine that is the most sensible. I feel like if you try to make a title before you know what you're going to be writing, then you're kind of locking yourself in. And that could kind of restrict you without you even realizing it. Yeah, because for me, I had the diviner, and then it became unfortunate. And for me, it was really difficult to figure out a title for my works. And that's why right now it's called Catalina, because I'm not quite sure if that is what the title is going to be at the end of the day, but I still want to talk about it. And so I don't want to I want to have some sort of title to say to other people. But yeah, Skeleton Soup. Yeah. We could talk all day. I'm gonna if no one else gets anything out of this, they need to go read Skeleton Soup. Or at the very least, you need to record yourself speaking at a poetry slam, because that one in particular, I feel like this is obvious for poetry, but I don't think a lot of people understand the process of writing poetry. But the fact that it is so seamless to speak out loud is incredible. I just needed to add that little last acclaim, or I don't know. I'm trying to say big words accreditation right now.
We're writers. We have to use big words.
Yes. How about praise? There we go.
Praise. Okay. It's a synonym. It's fine.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So going back to your works, you really like pull from themes first and some like visual ideas, like with the poppy field. And so I wanted to ask, like, I have noticed that like a lot of what you've written has like a dark or darker theme to it. And so I was just curious, like where you get that from.
For whatever reason, I have just always really gravitated towards writing things that have a dark theme. I'm not a really awfully sad, gruesome kind of person where I'm like, yeah, I'm going to write this story about someone dying, or, I'm so sad, I'm going to write this awful, heart-wrenching story so everybody feels like me. But I have had kind of a track record for writing things that are sad and kind of dark. I think that my inspiration for that really comes from the idea that sometimes those dark themes and those heavy feelings are feelings that readers really empathize with the most. For me as a reader, I kind of want there to be some kind of dark theme or something that really pulls at my heartstrings. So like if there's like a romance novel that I'm reading, I'm like, I really hope they have an awful fight before they make up. So it makes me feel even better when they do get back together. So I would say my inspiration for all of those really comes from pulling on my own feelings of, what makes me feel, really sad or really, heartbroken, or really channeling that through the writing. Because I do feel like, it's like in the Hunger Games, they say the only thing that's worse than fear is hope. It's
right.
kind of like that whole feeling of like, if you can tug on someone's heartstrings, either for good or for bad, which most of the time to elicit a response from someone, it is a dark theme, but that's what people really cling on to, and something that really makes them apply their own emotional profile to a story. That's kind of what I try to elicit from my different writings.
I love that. Yeah. I've noticed that like all the short stories I've ever like read, and I've read mostly Ray Bradbury, who is a science fiction author. So of course he's going to have a lot more of a scary streak. But it's just something that I've noticed, and like that's not like a bad thing at all. I was just curious if there was like something specific to like your experiences as both an artist and a writer that made you kind of lean towards that way. So that's really, really cool.
Yeah. I feel like writing itself is very therapeutic for me. So maybe there is also some angst coming through there, which is why there's some dark themes. So I will say I do use writing as a therapeutic kind of tool. So I don't know, maybe there's something to explore there.
Hey, that is not
We're having a therapy session right now.
Yeah, that is not bad at all. I mean, like, I think it's like when you write, it's worth putting your thoughts and your feelings and your beliefs within that story, because like, how else are you really going to express yourself otherwise? And how are you going to connect with other people otherwise?
Yeah, and writing has always been one of the ways that humans have communicated with each other and passed down stories and emotions. So, I mean, I feel like it is a great way to connect with people.
So I wanted to know, like, the value that you find in short stories, poetry, that sort of thing, and what you could tell aspiring writers about short stories in order for them to, like, be more excited and kind of push towards that direction more.
I will say that as a writer, I feel like there is a big push where even people who are not in that writing sphere, they're always asking, well, when are you going to publish a book? Like, are you working on a book? And they're almost always talking about long form fiction or nonfiction. They're talking about, a 200, 300 page book. That's what they envision a book is, which it is. But a lot of people don't know that there's also value in books that are a collection of short stories or a collection of poetry. Most of the time in literary classes in college, they have you read a collection of short stories that are published as one book. So it doesn't always have to be a novel. It can be a collection of short stories or poems. And personally, I think the reason that I gravitate towards the format of short stories and poetry is that I feel like, for me at least in my writing process, that I'm able to convey a certain emotion or certain scene in a better light than I would if I tried to apply that same feeling and emotion and series of events throughout a full book. So when you do publish a novel, you have to have a plot, you have to have characters, you have to have kind of a dynamic storyline that you have to kind of carry through the whole book. And with short stories, you're able to give the reader a glimpse of only a certain section of that story. You don't have to have a exposition and climax, and you can, but you can also just show a snapshot of a scene or a feeling. The same way with poetry. There is a lot of poetry about nature and things like that, and they're kind of focusing in on a certain theme. And I think that's one of the big differences, is that it is a different writing process. I feel like, at least in my experience, I'm able to take a feeling, take a visual image in my head, and plan it out and execute it in a different fashion than I would if I tried to stretch that feeling out, stretch that idea out to really plan a whole novel off of that. For me, in my process, I haven't really found something that I would want to invest all of that time and planning into. For me, writing is a therapy, and I usually go in already with, I want this. I want to put this into it. I want this. And I'm able to really focus in on that and not have to worry about, well, how do these characters interact? What is the world building of this story? What is, I don't have to worry about those aspects. I'm able to really focus in on the exact thing that I want to portray. And I think that's what a lot of people lose when they try to force an idea into a full-length, 30-chapter book. They lose that memorable moment that they started with that really inspired them, because they're trying to really stretch it out to fill the idea of a novel. So I would say there is a lot of value in short stories and poetry, where you're able to really focus in on that idea without losing the originality that you came in with.
That is so well said. That's incredible. When you are writing short stories, how do you draft and then edit your work? Because I imagine the most you've written for one story is 2,000 words?
Probably around that. I would say around 2,000 or under that, maybe 1,500, somewhere in that sweet spot. Nothing too terribly long. And a lot of that does come from short story submissions for literary journals. They usually don't want you to go over 1,000 to 2,000 words. That's kind of like a common thing that I've seen. The maximum I've seen is 3,000 for a short story submission. So if it is something that you're writing with the intention of publishing, they usually do ask you to keep it kind of in that range.
Keep a short story short.
Keep a short story short, hey. It's in the title.
For real. So, how would, when you're writing, how, is your drafting process, very, quick? Or do you even have an editing process when it's a short story? Like, how does that work?
Usually the editing process is a lot quicker than if I'm working on like a draft of a novel or a, long project. Usually a short story, I go into it with an idea. I just sit down and I just write. And I'm not worried about, how things are flowing. I'm not worried about, if the story starts kind of leaning towards, one way where something happens and that wasn't originally part of the plan. I just let it happen. At that point, you just got to let it go. You just got to go with it. My main approach is just to write. Don't worry about if it sounds good. Don't worry about where it's going. Just write and keep writing. And then once you get to a stopping point, I kind of pull back and evaluate what I've written, see kind of where the story is going if I don't already have a plot mapped out or a certain process of events mapped out, see where it's leaning. Then I kind of go back and I pick and pull, I want to keep this. This could be worded differently. So I do kind of edit as I go for short stories, and that really does help with the flow of planning them out. In comparison to if I was writing a novel, I would write and try to get most of the draft done before I edited. With short stories, you do have that lenience of being able to edit as you go because you're not worried about how what you're writing is going to affect the plot long term. With writing a novel or a longer project, you can't just kind of willy-nilly throw stuff out if you have plot events already planned for another 11 chapters, because it could impact what you're going to write in the future, and that might mess up your planning process if you've already done that.
That's actually really interesting. So I don't know if you're familiar with the term like plotter versus pantser.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So you definitely sound like a pantser. And that is really fascinating to me because I guess I would assume that because it's a short story and you're restricted by the word count. If I tried to just write freestyle, I feel like I would end up very easily going over those 3,000 word max limit. So when you are just free form writing, are you aware of the word restrictions? Is that something that comes naturally to you? Or when you're picking and choosing, do you often have to remove a lot more?
That's a great question because at least for me, what I do is when I'm just writing, not worrying about how it's sounding or any other kind of restrictions on the writing, what I usually do is I let myself write as much as I feel inspired to do so. It doesn't matter how long it goes. It could be 20,000 words if I wanted to. I give myself the liberty of writing as much as I want or as much as I feel. And what I do is if I know that I have to, go by a certain word count, I basically, in Google Docs, I keep that. That's usually where I write.
No, Google Docs is where it's at. I'm just smiling because I'm understanding.
Yes, I usually keep that document untouched, and I'll copy and paste it into a new document. And that way, if I have a certain word count I have to go by, then I can go through that process of removing and, omitting certain sentences, certain parts of the story. But I always have that backup of what I was initially inspired to do. So that way, if I'm in the process of editing and I say, wow, this is just really not working out, I really liked it the way it was before, I can go back to the original document and say, oh, this was a really good idea. I need to pull that back in. So it gives me the liberty of creating without care. Not necessarily that I'm not invested in what I'm creating, but creating without boundaries and giving yourself the liberty to let yourself create. No restrictions, not worried about anything. And that way you always have your initial super inspired, word count that you had originally. And then you can pick and choose.
Like, that's really, really cool how you're able to not allow the word restrictions of short stories to stop you.
Right.
And then you're like still able to make something, like you're still able to take what you've written and reduce it down to where you want it. And it comes out amazing. Like that is incredible.
Well,
like,
and sometimes with that process, like I said, when you're picking and pulling, sometimes it doesn't always work out. Sometimes you do have to kind of start over or take out a big chunk of what you're writing, just to help with it. It's good to write as much as you want, but sometimes it can be a rambling mess, and you have to give it some tough love. So it is a give and take process. Even if you do, get to take out a bunch and, not lose the heart of what your story is about. Sometimes you do have to give it some tough love and, start from scratch on some points. So,
yeah, I feel like that's something a lot of new upcoming writers struggle with is deleting. And I noticed you said that you open a new Google Doc and you essentially cut and paste. Is that correct?
Right. That's right.
Okay.
So that way, no matter how many times I decide to edit whatever I'm working on, I always have a master copy of the original. So that way, like I said, if I delete something and I say, wow, I should have kept that in. That sounded pretty okay. I need to put that back in. Or heaven forbid, you delete your document of all the stuff that you're editing or working on. You always have a master copy, because I have done that. I have been editing something and said, oh, I need to go back, and there was nothing to go back to. And at that point, you kind of have to truck on with what you've got. So if you can save yourself some time and some heartache, always keep your original, even if it's bad and you hate it and you just want to delete it. Some writers are like that. They start a draft, they start a story, and they say, ooh, I hate this, and they delete it. You never know what could have happened to that story if you kept it. Could be a couple months down the road and you see that half-written document sitting in your Google Docs. You say, oh, I could have really done something with that. I read a book that inspired me. Or, if it's something that you get inspiration from, you're taking a class that you like. You never know when you can really work off of something like that. So that's a tip for new writers. Always keep your Google Docs or whatever you're writing on. Keep it up to date. Don't pointlessly delete things just because you don't like it. You may like it in the future.
That's such a great point, because like for me, what I do whenever I edit or specifically delete things is I literally have its own file called Forgotten Files. And it just includes literally everything that I've deleted off of my round of edits. And so I don't typically find myself going back to the Forgotten Files, but there's just something that feels safe about transferring it over somewhere else, so it doesn't feel like it's just gone forever.
Right. And that way, even if you never touch them again, you have that sense of security in knowing that if you wanted to, you could.
Yes. 100%. I'm glad that we can relate to that. You currently have 5 published works in 4 different states. Is that correct?
I believe so, yes.
Okay.
I would have to check about the states thing, but yeah, close enough.
Okay. That sounds very fancy. So I wanted to ask, I wanted you to explain more about your submission process. How do you find literary journals and decide what and when to submit?
So currently my process for submitting to literary journals is I find all of the potential places to submit through Submittable, which is basically a platform where different literary journals and different social initiatives will post, as call for submissions, call for art, and you can also apply for grants and things like that through it. It's harder to find submission calls directly from the literary journals themselves. unless you know of a specific literary journal that you want to submit to. For example, I was published with Sheepshead Review. Unless you just knew to look for Sheepshead Review, it would have been really hard to find that anywhere else. So Submittable kind of combines all of those open calls into one platform, which makes it easy, and you can kind of filter through what you're looking for. So for a process of narrowing down what I want to submit to, you do have to kind of do your due diligence when it comes to submitting to literary journals through there, because I have seen in the past there are open calls for submissions for literary journals that are either just starting out, that don't have reputable information about them, or basically kind of like slush pile submissions where you have a company or organization that's asking for submissions and they have 10, 20, 30 open calls all on Submittable, and your submissions kind of just end up in a slush pile. If you get published, you may not hear something for 8, 9, 10 months down the road. And they're constantly asking for submissions. And at that point, the quality of work that they're accepting, you're not really sure what their publishing process is going to look like. So in my opinion, it is better to submit to literary journals that have a good track record, where they have published multiple copies in the past. You can also look them up. There is a website, Community of Literary Magazines and Presses. There is a website for that, and it will show you all of the literary journals that have registered through them. It's basically an organization that highlights different literary presses across the United States. And if they're on that website, there's a good chance that they have been verified. So that, they network, they're not going to necessarily steal your writing. I haven't come across any situations like that, but it is good to be wary, especially if you're very protective of your writing, or you only want to publish with a literary journal that has print issues, if you don't want your work featured on a website. So you can really filter through that as well. Submittable has been a really great platform to go through.
I had no idea that this existed. So, that is huge. Do you have any future publications you'd like to share with us?
At this point, I do not have anything that's in that queue of up and coming. Mm-hmm. I am still submitting to literary journals. Okay. There are some submissions that I haven't heard back from yet, so I'm not sure if those are forthcoming or not. I am working on some book drafts that are not, they're not at the editing, publishing stage yet. They're still babies. They're still very young, and I have not been able to spend as much time on them as I'd want to. Kind of like our conversation went earlier, I do need to do better about investing more time into it. Like I said, sacrifices have to be made in order to get them done. But there is one of those book drafts that I've been working on for the last 3 years, but it is still, like I said, in the very early stages, because I am so passionate about the project, but it's almost at my own detriment, because I'm so passionate that immediately when I feel like I'm not doing it justice, I pull myself back and I say, I'm going to write something else. I'll come back to it. And I still have not truly committed to really putting all of my undivided attention into it. So it's good to get other works done, but I would really like to, in the future, focus on that one draft.
I hope you do. That sounds wonderful. Are you ready for some fun random questions?
I'm super ready.
Okay. So we were talking about boba and Monster and whatnot. So what is your favorite drink to have next to you while you write?
Ooh, this is a really good question, and I feel kind of called out because I literally have it. I literally have it.
It's in the room.
I put it out of the room because I knew that if I had it with me, that I would be drinking on it while we were talking, and I have a bad habit of that, so I purposely set it out of the room. But my drink of choice right now is the Red Cherry Slush Alani energy drink. It is really good. And especially when I'm writing or I'm doing art, I usually have to have some kind of coffee or energy drink with me. And that is the only energy drink that I have found that does not give me excessive heart palpitations. It makes me feel okay. So
it lifts the spirits.
That's right. And there's another brand that's like the probiotic kind of sodas called Olipop.
Okay.
And girl, they had a Barbie, limited edition Barbie themed Olipop drink, and it was like peaches and cream or something like that, and it had the Barbie design packaging on the outside, like pink, and I went crazy. I looked at the price and I said, it is unfortunate, but it is worth it.
Heard. Now I'm going to be looking on eBay, like any loose Barbie Olipop.
Does anyone have a Barbie Olipop dealer in their area?
Yeah. The second question is, what was the last book you gave 5 stars?
I will say I have read this book multiple times, but every time I read it, I absolutely love it. It's part of the Court of Thorns and Roses series.
Okay. That one?
Yes. Yes. It's the Wings and Ruin book of that series.
The third book, okay.
The third book, the drama. So good. I love it. I will say, every time I read that book, I find something new in it that I didn't see the first time I read it. And I just love it. I mean, I might be biased because I am a fantasy girly, and I love that kind of like the romance and the fantasy and the action and
the fae.
The fae, oh my gosh.
And the magic system.
Oh, it's just, I love everything about it. It might just be the universe, the writing itself is good. I love it. Sarah J. Maas, so good. 5 stars from me.
Wow, I think I gave Aqua War 4 stars. And I think the only reason was because the, ending was almost goofy to me about, all the different ex machinas, but at the same time, it's so much fun. I can't hate it. It's definitely been a long time coming of me being I'll never read this, to I'll begrudgingly read this, to I have all of them now. And then the final question I have is, do you have a song that you like to listen to that connects with any of the stories you've written so far?
I have a confession.
Okay.
That, unfortunately, I do have a confession when it comes to music and what I listen to when I write. I have a slight obsession with the Twilight Saga. And I listen to... I have the soundtracks for the movies.
Girl, I got you.
On my Spotify. So I do listen to the soundtracks for those movies a lot. And I would say if there's any music that inspires my writing of those kind of dark themes and kind of moody settings, the New Moon soundtrack. The New Moon soundtrack and the Eclipse soundtrack.
I love that. Thank you so much, Amber, for talking to me today about your writing and publishing process.
So I'm just thankful to be on today, and I'm really happy to talk to you.